I'm Councillor McCall, Chair of the committee.
Chair, the meeting is now live.
Thank you. So welcome everybody to evening, that's a good start, Eden District Council's Budget Planning Committee. I'm Councillor McCall, Chair of the committee. And this Budget Planning Committee has been streamed live on the Eden District Council website. And so before I start the meeting, I'd like to hand over to Paul Sutton, who's the Council's Interim Director of Corporate Services, to take us through some announcements. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. This meeting is being hosted remotely using conferencing software, which allows members, officers and the public to attend and contribute safely. This is allowed due to regulations contained in the Coronavirus Act 2020. This meeting is recorded and will be available to the public for 21 days after the conclusion of today's meeting. I'd like to please remind members to remain muted with cameras off until invited to speak through the chair or myself. This is to eliminate any background noises or any unintentional disturbances. When called on to speak, please remember to switch your camera on and unmute yourself. If at any stage members wish to ask a question or propose or second a recommendation, please could they do so by switching on their cameras. The chair will call on members in turn. Any vote during this meeting will be taken as an unofficial recorded vote, with the name of each councillor being read out for them to answer for, against or abstain, and this is for the sake of full transparency. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. First off, I've got a slight amendment to the order of agenda items. So first, could I have any apologies for absence, please?
Chair, we've not had any apologies for absence. However, Councillor Hanley isn't here tonight.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, I'd like to introduce all the members of the committee by way of a roll call. And at this point, bring forward agenda item 3, the declarations of interest item, at the same time. So when I call your name, can you respond with present and declare any interest you might have at this point? If you don't make any declarations, I'll assume you have none. So Councillor Baker?
Present and no declarations of interest.
Councillor Dew?
Present and no declarations to declare.
Councillor Isles?
Present, no declarations, but I'd like to inform the chair that I'm making an audio recording of the meeting for my own purposes.
Councillor Hanley, I believe, is not present from what I can see. So I'll move on to Councillor Lancaster.
Present, no declarations of interest.
Councillor Nicholson.
Present, no declarations of interest.
Councillor Ryland.
Present, no declarations of interest.
And Councillor Wicks.
Present and no declarations of interest.
Right, so I can confirm that I have no declarations of interest to make either. I'd like to introduce the officers in attendance tonight. We have Paul Sutton, who's Interim Director of Corporate Services, and also Nicola Baker and Heather Donaldson, Democratic Services Officers. First item was apologies for absence, which we've already dealt with. And the second item is to sign the public minutes, which is BPC 10-121 to BPC 47-121 and private minute BPC 47-1021. The meeting of this committee held on the 14th of January as a correct record of these proceedings. So this will be signed when it's safe to do so. However, I think I've got someone that wishes to make a comment. Was it Councillor Nicholson?
That's correct, Chair.
Well, I was going to wait until after they had been proposed and seconded. My comment is about the content and of the minutes.
Chair, you can call for a proposer and seconder and then ask the question.
Okay, yeah,
Councillor Ryland would like to propose.
thank you. I've got a
I'll
second.
second it, that's okay.
Right, thank you, Councillor Riles.
I'd like to propose that we accept the minutes, Councillor Ryland.
Okay, so can I have a vote on this? And the
Chair,
yeah.
Chair, you take Councillor Nicholson's question now. If it's about the content of the minutes.
Councillor Nicholson, do you want to bring it up now or until or after the vote?
My comment, but my first comment is about the accuracy of the minutes. The minute circulated this afternoon of the confidential section of the last meeting shows me as being present, but I wasn't because I had declared an interest in the subject matter and I left the meeting before that discussion took place. So that should be corrected. My second point concerns the matter of conveying the views of this committee to the executive. Now, at the last meeting, this committee resolved to make observations and comments to the executive, but I understand that wasn't done, and I would like an explanation for that, please.
Through you, Chair.
Yeah, please, Paul.
Yeah, it was done, Councillor Nicholson. What the executive decided to do was to consider the comments along with all of the other consultation responses ahead of making its final budget decisions at its meeting on the 16th of February. So you'll see within the budget report that the consultation responses from this committee are recorded formally. The executive will consider them formally before making their final budget recommendations to council, and that's the appropriate time for it to consider the recommendations from the committee.
Well, if I may, I mean, I think this represents a significant departure from the previous procedure, because we've been told on a number of occasions that this is the Budget Scrutiny Committee. Now, previously, the Budget Scrutiny Committee formulated a report, and the chairman of that Budget Scrutiny Committee actually made representations to the executive and also to council on the findings of the views of the committee. And it really does seem to me that this is something that needs to be considered, because we don't make these comments lightly. We've had no acknowledgement whatsoever of the comments. We didn't know what you have just told us. Had we been told that, then it may have appeased us to some extent. But to me, the procedures need to be reviewed so that members of this committee are very clear about what will happen to what they do. Otherwise, it may appear that they're wasting their time. Thank you.
If I might, Chair.
Yeah, sure.
So that was said at the executive at its last meeting on receipt of the recommendations that were made by the Budget Planning Committee. Apologies, I was unaware that it wasn't clear, but responses and consultation responses from this committee are always fed into the executive. As I say, on this occasion, given the comments that were made, the executive felt it appropriate to wait until the right time to consider the recommendations, which is ahead of making their final recommendation to full council. Councillor Ryland wishes to make a comment. Chair.
Okay, Councillor Ryland.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to comment, actually. I'm quite bemused that, I mean, I attended the executive meeting, and I'm quite bemused that, I mean, never before in my professional life has a democratic recommendation neither been noted and neither was it referenced. There was nothing said about this scrutiny committee at the executive, so I'd like to add that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ireland.
If I might, Chair,
Yeah.
it was referenced through both what the finance portfolio holder said and the leader. And I can reiterate that the appropriate time to consider the recommendations is not past. So the point that the executive need to consider the recommendations is before they make their final budget proposals to full council, and that is the intent. That is the clear intent from the report, as the recommendations are set out within the report, along with the other consultation responses received to date.
Okay, Councillor, do you want to?
Yeah, I would just like to make a point. I'm not going to challenge what Paul says, other than to say we've had two councillors who wish to make points which I assume they would like minuted, but the minutes do not contain any of the conversation or the debates. It just ends up in the what's actually being decided. So the minutes will not record any of this, which I think is a real shortcoming. It certainly wouldn't happen in the county council meetings. We would always record what members say, so that once you read the minutes, you can get the gist of the debate that took place. So I think that's a real failing in this particular council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dew.
Yeah, if I might, Chair.
Yeah.
I think that's a really fair and valid point, and I'll take it away. It's I'm used to more comprehensive minutes. I believe it's what was decided some time ago, but it's certainly something that we can review, particularly given we are looking at the constitution, and a constitution review is currently happening. So I'm more than happy to take that away, Councillor Dew.
Thank you.
Have we anyone else who wishes to make
comment
before we move on?
Chair.
Councillor Isles.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The shortcomings of the minute is something that has been concerning me for several years now, which is why I took the opportunity, when legislation allowed, to make a recording of every meeting I attend. And I think it would be appropriate if we could arrange it that the video recordings of the meetings are available to the public for a lot longer than 21 days. As I've got recordings going back several years now, and I think if they just MP3 recordings would be an improvement if we could have those available for several years as an accurate historical record of what was actually said. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Councillor Isles, I'll take that one away as well. I, off the top of my head, I don't know what the statutory requirements are, and the FOI requirements in terms of keeping that information. The recordings currently are held for a period of time, which I think is a statutory period of time that they need to be held. Whether they're actually held but not available at that point, I'd need to find out, but I'll certainly take that away as well.
Can I make a comment, Chair? I don't want to labour this. I don't want to labour this, but minutes are the correct place to have the record of the meeting, because they will exist. They're in the public domain. That's the most straightforward way, and it should be a succinct but complete record of what was done in the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dew. So a few things to take away and consider there. Can we get round to actually having a vote on the minutes and their accuracy now, please. I've forgotten who's proposed.
Councillor Ryland proposed, Chair, and Councillor Isles seconded.
Okay.
And I'll take the vote.
Thank you.
Councillor Baker.
For.
Councillor Dew.
Abstain.
Councillor Isles.
With the proviso that Councillor Nicholson's correction is appended, I will say for.
Councillor, understood, Councillor Isles. Councillor Lancaster.
With the same proviso as Councillor Isles, I'll vote for.
Councillor McCall.
For.
Councillor Nicholson.
For, subject to amending, as I indicated.
Councillor Ryland.
For, also subject to amending.
Councillor Wicks.
For and ditto with the amendment.
Understood, councillors. That's unanimous, Chair.
Right, thank you, Paul. So we don't have declarations of interest because we've already dealt with that. So we're bringing forward on the agenda item 5 under any other items which the Chair decides are urgent, which is the Q3 budget monitoring 2021 and the medium-term financial plan. I move this item forward because it actually feeds into the revenue and capital budget, which we're going to be looking at later. So can I ask Mr. Sutton again to introduce this report, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, firstly, an apology. The agenda item should have been included on the main agenda and was missed off when it was published. It is obviously important information in a timely fashion and ahead of when the executive see the meeting. So we wanted to ensure it was on the agenda and to bring it forward because as the Chair quite rightly said, it feeds into the budget process. So it's really important when we're setting the budget and indeed at any time during the year that we've got an accurate snapshot of spend, but more importantly, projections of spend. And at the third quarter, we should have a good idea of what our final year positions on both revenue and capital are going to be, and they're set out within the report and within the 2 appendices which set out the detailed information around particular services in revenue and the individual capital schemes which are set out within the capital programme. I think, as has been explained through both Q1, Q2 and any budget meeting that we've had, the impact of the pandemic has been significant on our local businesses and individuals within Eden, but also on ourselves in terms of service provision and the additional work that we needed to do to support grant funding streams, both to individuals and to local businesses. We continue to provide that support, and I think given that we are in another national lockdown, that's likely to be ongoing for some time. I think that's referenced in the budget and the settlement where the government have already incorporated first quarter payments for the next financial year. So there is that understanding that this is an ongoing longer term issue which will continue to see funding brought in from the government. We have already had 4 tranches of funding roughly related to the first 4 quarters of the year, albeit slightly different in the way that they've been delivered, but the funding has been significant and is currently stands at £1.1 million, which obviously has a significantly positive effect on our monitoring. We have undertaken a significant amount of work right across the board to understand what our forecast positions are. As I say, they're set out at Appendix A at 4.5. they're summarised to show that we expect to spend just under £1.1 million, which is about £100,000 different to where we were at Q2, where we're paying an overspend of about 70,000. So all in all, and I think, you know, certainly compared to a significant number of other authorities that I've been speaking to, our financial position balancing through the overspend and through the government funding is a relatively good place to be. The overspends are in those same areas, so £600,000 of the overspend relates to the leisure provision, which for a significant proportion of the year has been closed down, and you know, that's continued. That's expected, to continue at least for another couple of months before we come out. But we've spoken to GLL, the leisure provider, on numerous occasions. We have also made a bid into a new national leisure fund and have been awarded £80,000 that we're able to bid for. We still haven't heard that we've received that. The bid went in, and we should expect something back on that this month. And the other major pressures are around lost car parking income, increased costs for homelessness, and additional costs around ground maintenance. In terms of capital, the detailed capital budget set out Appendix 2. There are a couple of amendments with two schemes that should have been included after they were approved by Council in July 2020, which is the Development Management System and the Finance, HR and Payroll System. They are subject to an immediate slippage on the basis that we have work, particularly on the finance system, because of the decision around local government reorganisation. It wouldn't be prudent to start work and spend significant money on a system that might not be used if we were to go into a new entity. So we are waiting to hear what the announcement is on that, and we're expecting something again this month, which will give us an idea of whether reorganisation is going to progress. So all of those schemes are now subject to review. You can see that the amount of slippage is significant. As I say, the vast majority of that was slipped in Q2, and we are currently, and is, you know, a lot of it is COVID related, where we've not been able to get on with particular projects because of COVID. And we are going to review in the first quarter, sure all of those schemes are deliverable within the timescales that they're set within the programme. Chair, I'll pause at that point and take any questions.
Councillor Dew.
Can I speak, Chair? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you agree, Paul, that the additional money from the government potentially for the leisure contract of 80,000 is quite significant in light of the fact that the suggested council tax increase will only raise £105,000, and if that £80,000 were to be granted, you know, that puts the council in a very positive position relative to that suggested council tax increase. Would you say that was a fair point?
I would, but I would have to add that to cover the costs for the period that it's set, which is the final quarter of this financial year, we would have needed £200,000 for us to be able to balance leisure costs for that particular period. So the 80,000 it definitely isn't insignificant, but the additional costs that we're seeing through leisure are significant. They are much higher than £80,000 a quarter.
Have we another question?
Councillor Nicholson, Chair.
Yeah.
Councillor
Thank
Nicholson,
you.
thank you.
Just a question about, there's a very comprehensive details of the proposed expenditure on council services by directorate and work areas, but what assumptions are being built in to these numbers about increases in fees and charges for council services?
On this, nothing. This is the monitoring for this year, Councillor Nicholson.
But I was thinking about but then referring also to the budget and the MTFP, what assumptions have been made about there must be some assumptions about prospective increases in fees and charges.
They have been built in individually through those areas. I don't have the detail for specific areas. If there's specific areas that you're thinking about, then I can bring that forward or I can circulate that information if it's required, Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I really would have thought that in a budget it should be possible to identify any projected increases compared with the current levels, but we'll wait until I understand that a paper will go to the executive prior to the commencement of the new financial year, and I think we can wait to then, but it's disappointing that the question cannot be answered at this stage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nicholson. I'm getting a slide of the Budget Planning Committee 9th February 2021 on the screen. Should that be there? Are we going to be looking at something?
Chair, I think we're just having issues at the moment with who's live. Is that right, Nicola?
Yeah, that's correct. I think we might be resolved for the moment, but if you don't mind, I'm just going to leave the slide there so we can pop it up if we're having further issues.
No problem. Are there any further questions at this point?
Don't think so, Chair.
Okay. So
We need a
so
proposer,
we need
Chair.
to propose. Yeah, I'm prepared to propose this report. Anyone prepared to second it?
I'll second that, Councillor Isles.
Thank you, Councillor Isles. Okay,
Councillor Nicholson would like to make a comment, Chair.
Okay,
I said I wish to comment once we get into debate after the motion has been proposed and seconded.
It has been,
if I may, thank you.
It has been proposed and seconded, Councillor.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Well, I mean, it will come as no surprise that that I am personally really quite opposed to the proposals for an increase in council tax, and I made that point on a number of occasions. Members will be familiar, with that. But in terms of the paper that we got this week, the first thing I want to say is that I welcome the reference to the council priorities in section 3, and I think there's a reasonable overview of the matters that have been experienced over the past year. But it's still disappointing that it's really very difficult to reconcile the budget with the plan. We can have some guesstimates at that based on the on the numbers, but I think that is a serious omission. I would repeat that there is, in my view, there is absolutely no justification for the council tax increase. We've had may I finish? Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Nicholson, could I make a point? Sorry, we're not on the budget report, Councillor Nicholson. We're talking about the quarter. We're talking about the Q3 monitoring report.
We are going to come to that in due course, Councillor Nicholson.
Sorry, I thought we were on the agenda. I've got here shows agenda item 4, which is the one that was circulated this week.
Through you, Chair.
Revenue Capital Budget 2021 and Medium Term Financial Plan, MTFE.
Through you, Chair.
This is the
through you, Chair.
1st of February.
Through you, Chair. We moved the Q3 item ahead of the budget item, Councillor Nicholson.
But it's not on the agenda I've got in front of me.
We've just moved it as part of the meeting, as part of this meeting, Councillor Nicholson. The Chair moved that item.
To where?
To ahead of the budget meeting, which is why we're discussing the Q3 budget monitoring report, not the budget report.
But why is it not? But why is it not on the agenda that was circulated?
It is on the agenda. It's on the agenda as an urgent item, and we've moved that urgent item ahead of the budget report.
Right. Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I misunderstood.
It's okay.
Thank you.
If I could just remind, thank you. If we can put cameras on, so if we just do one, so please don't use the chat, just put cameras on. That would be helpful.
Okay. So I think Councillor Dew was first.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to emphasise once again the point that's probably already been made, but I think is very succinctly put in 4.7, which is the fact that the government support actually meant that despite the variance, the additional cost of, I think summarised as £1.1 million, the government support has outstripped that. So we're actually going to have a net underspend. And I think it's really important that we emphasise that. And the government has helped significantly with all the COVID-related variants, despite what some members of the public think, and I think it's important that if members of the press here, they emphasise that. Thanks.
Thanks, sir. And Councillor Ryland.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to comment with regards to the difficulty of looking at an agenda and also looking at the appendices, which have been sent via email, and as Paul said at the start, he apologised for the late sending of them, but this is a regular occurrence. It is not easy to, I'm actually looking at my own computer screen trying to follow this meeting on the tablet, and Councillor Nicholson's problem he outlined as well. We are having difficulty. I would also like to comment to the meeting as well that we do need to have a standard procedure. We've been told tonight that to speak we have not got to use the chat, yet in other committee meetings we are told to use the chat. So I really do feel it's got to be standardised. So I would like this minuted in the minutes, and I would like it addressed. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, if I might. Apologies, Councillor Ryland. What we're trying to do is obviously make these meetings as smooth as we possibly can, and I think what we've found, and obviously we use the chat functions initially. That function works well when you've got meetings like council where you've got significant numbers of people, and we have trialled the use of putting cameras on, and it does seem to work better for most members, because some members do struggle with the chat, and we've had messages going into the wrong chat functions and members not being able to speak. So we are trying to make it simpler. And apologies, we do need a standardised approach. I think the approach of putting cameras on is a better approach, which is why I wanted to use that tonight. I appreciate trying to do that at the last minute is probably not helpful, but we are picking up both. So if something's going in the chat, we are seeing it and we're making sure we pick up both. But as I say, putting cameras on, I think, is the simplest way for a meeting of this type.
Thank you, Paul. I would like to make the comment that actually I asked Democratic Services for paper copies of meetings. I actually find it easier. I totally understand if things are sent out late, but you have to give leeway to us councillors if we are trying to see three different things. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ryland, I absolutely understand. I've got you on my laptop. I've got a screen behind with 4 different things open. So I absolutely understand the difficulty of being able to make sure that you've got the right thing open at the right time. I'm also conscious that that some of the information gets printed and maybe doesn't come out at the right size. What I would ask, and I do absolutely accept the point that we need to get this stuff out as quickly as we can. There was something specific happened this week on the budget report that, or last week, sorry, that meant that it needed to be incorporated into the report, to the budget planning committee to have it as well as the executive, which is why it got delayed. But what I would say is, if there are any issues, please let us know before the meeting, so we can at least try to be able to do something about it. So if members can check, I mean, clearly on the day of the meeting we can't get typed papers, we get printed papers out to members. So if members do want that, please let us know. And if there's anything that we can do to try and help, please do let us know, and we'll do everything that we can to make sure that members have got access to that information. This is a committee where where we are going to have that type of information. It is going to be spreadsheets and detailed information, and it's right that information should be there. But of course, it does need to be legible and accessible. So, so yeah, please let us know, and we'll do everything that we can to make sure you get that information again.
Okay. At this point, can I just ask Councillor Baker if he wants to make a comment on this, because he spoke to me earlier about the volume of paper, or the volume of printout that was entailed, particularly for this meeting. Councillor Baker?
Thank you, Chair. My comment really is very similar to that of Councillor Ryland. I find it exceedingly difficult to read. I don't know how many pages there are this time, to read so many of pages, especially the financial information, on my laptop. And I think when it's a large volume, we should always receive them in hard copy, such as they do for the planning committee. So I'm in support of what Councillor Ryland said. Thank you.
Yeah, fair point. We'll take that one away. Thank you, Chair.
I thought there was someone else waiting to speak.
It was Councillor Isles had his camera on earlier, Chair. I'm not sure if you want to check if he still wishes to speak.
Councillor Isles?
I was just going to add to the comments about change of procedure. I do know, as the chairman of the committee, it's even more difficult for the chairman to keep track of the chat as well as all the other bits of paper that you get, including the script. So I think anything that could make a chairman's job easy, I'm very, very in favour of. That's my comment.
Certainly at the moment it's looking easy for me, because I'm not actually having to look at 2 places on one screen at once.
My comment exactly.
Then look at my own screen alongside.
Through you, Chair, I think that's right. I just do take the point that it is something that we've kind of gone with on tonight, and actually we just need to make it clear how we're doing it. I think members will find it easier as we go forward, but yeah, we'll put out some clear instructions before the next meeting.
Thank you, Paul. Have we any more comments pertaining to this item? This is the Q3 budget monitoring and the medium-term financial plan.
Don't think so, Chair.
Okay, so basically all we need to do then is to note the report. We don't have any recommendations, do we?
No, that's right, Chair.
Okay. So
shall I take a vote?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Councillor Baker.
4.
Councillor Dew.
4.
Councillor Isles.
4.
Councillor Lancaster.
4.
Councillor McCall.
4.
Councillor Nicholson,
Or
Councillor Ryland,
Or
Councillor Wicks.
For.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Okay, so back to Mr. Sutton to introduce what is actually numbered as item 4, revenue and capital budget 2021-22.
Thank you, Chair. The report in front of us is the final budget proposals report to be considered by the executive at its meeting on the 16th of February, when it will make recommendations to the council based around those that are set out from 2.3. So approve and recommend balanced budget for council, consider and recommend council tax increase, proposed capital programme, medium-term revenue plan, to note the impact on the reserves, the One Eden transformation savings target, and the budget consultation responses set out in Appendix A. I'd just like to go through the issues from 4. So the budget followed its usual process, and the final settlement has now been received by government on the 4th of February, and there are no changes from the provisional settlement. So the council's funding is in line with what it was expecting in December. After the debate in the previous meeting, I wanted to set out at 4.3 the core spending power, which is set by government, and that's set at the point of the spending review, and it just shows, the chart 4.3 shows what constitutes the increase that local authorities have received or would receive, and that is based upon increasing council tax through both the increase in tax base and increase in council tax itself. And you can see that compared to the other elements of direct funding that we would receive. So you can see that new homes bonus, which is big for us, has reduced, but that has been compensated by the lower tier support grant. But the increases in retained business rates and the settlement funding assessment and rural services delivery grant are minuscule compared to that of council tax. And I should stress that that's an across the sector, both tiers of local government. The revenue budget, so at 5, the revenue budget proposals are as set out in the original provisional budget, and they're set out Appendix A unchanged. The capital programme, there are three changes to the capital programme. The first 2 relate to the 2 ICT schemes that I mentioned in the Q3 monitoring report, and as I say, essentially they should have been included because they were approved by full council in July 2020. And the third relates to a change in the budget for the single site Vereda House project, where the council has been successful in an application for government funding to support the decarbonisation of Vereda House. And at this stage, we've increased the budget to allow us to be able to undertake the works, which will see a zero carbon building and build. 7, proposed council tax increase of £5 is included, and that is unchanged from the previous proposals report, so from the last meeting. And within the medium-term financial plan, Appendix C, the revenue implications of the changes to the capital programme have been incorporated. I'd say at this point that the additions issue that Councillor Dew picked up at the last meeting has been amended as well, and what that was a change that was made in the medium-term financial plan, which was due to the additional funding from government for COVID for the first quarter hadn't been included in the detail of the revenue appendix. It has now, and it does now balance. The reserves and balances are set out at Appendix D, and they also reflect the changes through the capital programme. Item on the or the substantive changes within the final budget proposals relate to the One Eden transformation programme and the savings target. So what we said we would bring is the detailed proposals of how we're going to generate the savings, and they're set out at 10.3. And they really boil down into the specific areas where we know we need to generate savings. Those that are in the earlier parts of the medium term, so single site, Heart of Cumbria, the commercial around Vereda House and the HR restructure are in some significant detail. We've been through and looked at those very specifically, and they're what we believe we can prudently achieve in terms of savings. Some of the others that come later, including the commercial around projects such as Old London Road and the operational delivery contracts, are at a point where less work's been completed. Do believe that there are savings that can be delivered through both, and obviously one of the questions that came from this committee last time was around delivering through commercial, and it is something that we're already looking at trying to achieve. With the savings target and the level of savings required to be made in 2021, we don't think that we can make all of those savings in the first year. And what's shown across the medium term is a balance through the use of earmarked reserves. So we would use 200,000 worth of reserves in the first year and seek to balance that over the period of the medium term. And obviously, this is at this point in time. Clearly, those things will change if we are able to get more from the rentals for Vereda, then great. It will mean that we need to either use less reserves or find fewer savings down the road. So we will continue to look at ways of driving savings, and clearly we'll try to make savings in the financial year so that we don't have to use that amount of reserves in the first year to kind of smooth it across the medium term. And I think the final point I'd like to make is around the consultation. So at 12 and within Appendix E. So the comments have very much been heard and very much relayed into the executive for its meeting on the 16th. As I say, the council tax increase and views of the committee are very much understood and will be considered in the meeting next week. You can already see that in terms of prioritising new ways of generating council income, that's very much on the agenda. And as Councillor Nichols has already said, we are committed to providing that additional information, but we have to prioritise and we have to do the things that are of the greatest significant priority at this point in time. And we are flat out working on making sure that we're providing the advice, support, grants, undertaking the test, track and trace, and making sure that our response to COVID, we're back in a response phase. Our response to COVID is the right one, that we're keeping services at the level that the residents and businesses of this borough, of this district, expect to see, and I think we're doing that successfully. We will get that opportunity once we get back to some normality to start to do to start to link these things better. We do understand it's needed, and I hate to use the phrase that we're on a journey, but very much we are. And I think we've achieved an awful lot in the last 12 months, but that doesn't mean we don't understand that there's still much more to do. And I think what this budget does is allows us to continue that work. And as I say, if we do start to move away from COVID back to working in more normal circumstances, we'll be able to do and achieve some of those things. I think the One Eden transformation work shows that, you know, after the initial delays around COVID, we've got that back on track, and you know, we will continue to achieve those targets as set out within. And I'll pause at that point and take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Dew was first. Councillor Dew.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. I did find the report and the accounts helpful, Paul. Thank you. One question about detail and 6.3. You talk about Vereda House receiving a government grant of £856,000, and yet in Appendix D, under single site Vereda House, it shows an increase of £836,000. Where's that £20,000?
The 6.3 is an error, Chair, through you, Chair. I'd spied that. I spied that before, but didn't actually have time to check the two. But the 836 is the right amount.
It's only 20,000.
No, it's not only 20,000.
The other point is, just as an observation, and you can maybe, I found the detail on the One Eden transformation helpful, and the chart on page 10.3. But it intrigues me, Paul, that you can put down for the single site, for instance, in 21-22, that you're going to save £25,369. Now, is it not just inspired guesswork, all this? So how can you get it down to the very last pound, that you couldn't round it up to £370? I mean, can you just comment on that, just for the benefit of all those who think this is a science, but in fact it's an art, in my opinion?
And through you, Chair, Councillor Dew, you made a comment earlier, and it did make me smile because I always round. So I used a different number, and I can't remember exactly what it was. But when I was presenting, I rounded to the number, and I must admit, I do think exactly the point you make. They are though done through calculations. So we have gone through a set of calculations to come to what we think we can save through the two are split between Mansion House and Town Hall over time, and we've simply taken those numbers from the calculations and put them in. It wasn't deliberately to try and kind of pretend there's a massive amount of science in there, but what we have done is some very specific calculations, and that goes, I suppose that goes for the ones that, you know, that you can see are down to the nearest pound, and actually the ones that are a bit more of a bit more speculative. And you know, I'd say the rents on Vereda are currently that, and certainly the Old London Road and the operational delivery. You know, a kind of, at this point in time, we have just simply haven't done the level of work into those that brings it down to you know, to more specific figures. But that wasn't. But as I look at the numbers, that is kind of what's reflected in the table.
Thank you. I just thought there's no limit to your creativity. I was very impressed. Thank you.
We don't want financial officer to be too creative.
God knows.
Councillor Wicks.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. The HR savings on the HR restructure, obviously it's front end loaded. That presumably includes redundancy payments for staff, does it?
So the redundancy payments would be, because they're one-off, would be set against that, and within the programme they're funded from the funding from earmark reserves, so they would be separated out from that. So it doesn't include redundancy payments. That's the saving. No,
it doesn't include redundancy payments.
No,
they go into expenditure, do they? Different area.
They'll go into expenditure, but they are funded from earmark reserve. So there is a pot set aside for funding voluntary redundancy.
Okay. Another thing, it's well known that I'm against the council tax increase, but one of the comments on the papers comments on the budget we usually use for Appleby Fair. Now, you can probably come back to me with this because it probably isn't information you have at hand, but how much does Appleby Fair usually cost the council? Thus, how much did we save from not having Appleby Fair last year?
Through you, Chair, yeah, you're spot on. I don't know what what the costs of Appleby Fair are, but I can certainly go away and establish that. I think what I would say, and you know, this is why it's important that we go through the monitoring report first, because what the monitoring report tells us is that we're going to be slap bang on budget. So we have to look at, and you can pull out specific items. And you know, I guess if I was playing devil's advocate on that one, you know, and I know this is running the risk of Councillor Dew putting his camera on again because it is cyclical. So Appleby Fair, yeah, but leisure, because leisure's overspent. Yeah, but the government funding that comes in. And where we have to make sure is that overall, you know, we have to understand what's happening in our individual areas, but manage it overall. And so very much, you know, we manage to the overall funding that we get. So we might make some savings in Appleby Fair because it doesn't happen. But actually what we're seeing is in lots of other areas, we're seeing that increased expenditure. Yes, we're getting the funding in to help us support that. And at the minute, that's kind of leaving us, you know, bang on where we budget. I'd always make the point on council tax that if you don't put it in your base, it's £100,000, and you know, because it's about £105,000 for Eden, and that's incremental. So every year you don't do it, it goes 100, 200, 300, 400. So it is the way of it. What the government core spending power does is rightly identifies that more money can be in local government. It can be in local government provided that the council tax is increased. That's what the core spending power says. So if you flip that on its head, if you don't increase the council tax, then by definition in real terms you've got less money to spend.
Right. Well, I'll beg to differ, but anyway. And the last one was, where do consultants' fees fit into our budget? Because I know we've employed the services of Ricardo again for our waste contracting.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah, they fit within the specific. So for Ricardo, they will be included in waste and recycling. And if I might, they were specifically budgeted for because we knew that we were going to go through, knew we had to go through the process of retendering or either retendering the contract or finding a new way of delivering waste from 2022. So we know that the contract comes to an end, and we simply don't have the skills and expertise in-house to establish what are the best ways forward for delivering service. Waste is and you know, the outsourcing of waste is very much market driven. So so at times the market is you know, will deliver significant savings in terms of contracts because, you know, it's a very competitive market. I think at the moment it's less so. You're seeing lots of authorities. You know, I worked at an authority that had was bringing its waste contract back from an external contractor. So you're seeing that quite a lot, which makes the market you know, less strong. And so, you know, we really need that advice to be able to make the right decisions in terms of what to do with waste. When you layer then on local government reorganisation and that the implications that has in our thinking about how we should deliver waste, yeah, we really do need that advice to make sure we make the right decision and the right decision for
that advice before. I know we had a review or committee chaired by Councillor Isles where we considered information from a Ricardo consultants review. Have we not done this process already?
Through you, Chair, we did, but as I say, times change, and the reorganisation has made us think about whether the proposed methodology is the right methodology. If this authority is not going to be here in 5 years' time, it wouldn't recoup the savings through changing its methodology. So again, you know, I've got some experience of local authority trading companies, and they need a long time of operation to be able to deliver the sort of the level of savings that they would deliver against other options. So I think it's right to pause. It's right to take some additional advice and come back through the proper routes. I'll come back through scrutiny to make sure we make the right decisions about how we go forward with the waste contracts. We've got some time still to do that, and as I say, I think if it hadn't have been for reorganisation, I think we would have. You're right. We would have had the advice. But as I say, reorganisation changes the potential lifespan of this authority. So where we're making investment decisions, the potential is that actually they could be made on a shorter time period. We just have to take that into account.
Okay, I have another one, but I'll do it later because I'm taking up everybody's time.
Okay. Councillor Wicks, there's actually some information on the Q3 budget monitoring about Appleby Fair. There's a budget of £25,610. We spent not very much, less than 2,000. So, but that's projected. Councillor Ryland.
Thank you for that, Chair.
Councillor Ryland, do you want to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was looking at all the breakdown and the figures, and I was trying to find the deposit to the Heart of Cumbria project that I mentioned to you, Paul, in the briefing. Am I right in assuming you haven't actually calculated that amount of money?
So given the Heart of Cumbria information is commercial, and we considered that in private papers last time, I can't discuss the detail. However, if you look at the table at 10.3,
yeah,
second line down,
okay,
that's the net position over time. So
right, okay,
so that is that calculation.
Okay, thank you very much.
And if I'm through you, Chair, if I might,
Sure.
the reason it's there is because it is still reliant upon council making a decision of February.
Yeah, yes, I thought it would be that case. I found it interesting, your comment regarding Ricardo. The reason being that we may not be here, but I would have to disagree with you on that fact, because we don't know what system is going to be in place and with whom else yet. So if they are going to, I was also on the Task and Finish group that Councillor Isles was the chairman of, and it was a very comprehensive report from Ricardo. I failed to see how they could finalise a second report when we don't even know which other councils we're going to go with in a unitary. So really, I think that is a waste of money in my part. And I also would just like to add at this point that I am still of the same opinion that we should not be raising the council tax. I understand we have to balance the budgets. I'm not daft. I don't feel it's the right time. I think we should have balanced it. You maybe possibly, Paul, you've a great guy, you possibly could have balanced it a different way. I don't think we should be charging our residents because GLL, because of COVID, is making a shortfall. So that's just what I would like to comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ryland.
Chair, sorry, Chair. Councillor Ryland, could you just remind me what the first point was? Because I was listening to the and I missed the first one. There was something I wanted to respond to you on the first point.
Well, to be quite honest, I've forgotten. Because I've said it and I don't.
I have to. If it comes,
waste
if
contract, I think.
waste
Ricardo.
contract. Yeah. So what we're seeking to do is invest some money with Ricardo, who did exactly what we asked them to in the first piece of work. You're right, we don't know what other authorities we might go with, but we could end up spending an awful lot of money on something that wouldn't be useful to another authority under any circumstances. So if we were to, as an example, if we were to set up a local authority trading company, which is a significant investment in time and resources, and we're not here in 3 years' time, doing that would require time to be of value. So it generates relatively small amounts of savings over a number of years, which offset the one-off cost that you put in the first place. A standard investment appraisal that you would do. If Eden's only going to be here for 2 years, it's not going to reap the savings of setup of something that extensive. I have set up a LATCO, a blue collar LATCO. So in a unitary authority with a £16 million turnover, and it's a significant undertaking in cost and resource to set up something like that.
Okay, I take your point. We're not here to debate Ricardo. I would just like to say that actually I did understand when we did the task and finish review that actually Ricardo had been in talks with Allerdale. I understood that, and that is one of the councils that we potentially might be going with in this unit. Who knows? So my view is still the same, that I think it's wasted money.
Okay, can we move on to Councillor Wicks, please?
Yes, just one final thing, Paul. I picked up on what you said about increasing the budget to get a zero carbon build at Vereda House. How much has that increased the budget by?
So at the moment, through you, Chair, at the moment what we've done is increase the budget by the full amount, because we're still going through and working through the cost plan. So there's still some detailed work. We know that the budget to make the building zero carbon will be greater because we've already undertaken some of that work, but we haven't got to final figures as of yet. We do, then obviously we'll be putting ourselves in a position to go out to tender on the basis of a pre-tender estimate. Once we've worked out that pre-tender estimate, we'll let you know what it is. Will it
Speculatively, is it going to be more than the additional grant of 836,000?
At this stage, we don't think it will. We think we will have sufficient budget within the 836 plus the original 2.3, which was 960 acquisition, and then the nearly 1.3 for the build. So the 856 on the 1.3 will be what we expect to build within.
So it's going to cost 2.1 to build and refurbish the passive house.
That'll be the estimate.
Gosh, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wicks. Councillor Nicholson, have you got a question?
Yes, I have just a simple comment, really. It refers to the discussion about waste, and given that the current contract is due to expire in 2022, would it not be a simple matter to extend it in view of the uncertainty? And if we did that, would we not, because there would be provisions for extension in it, and we would make savings on consultants' fees, and it really puts the whole question of why we're looking at this, it undermines it really, in my view.
Through you, Chair, I think there are two elements to the waste question. One is about how how the contract is dealt with, and Councillor Nicholson is absolutely spot on. Extending the contract is an option. The is what the service looks like, and you know, we need to look at both options, both who does it, you know, is extending the contract the right route forward? If it is the right route forward, what is it that we want the contract and you want the service to look like going forward? So those two elements we're you know, we're going back and looking at, and we'll be reporting on in the new financial year.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Have we any more questions at this point? So can we well, I'm prepared to propose, but I'm proposing that we accept this report, just to note it at this point. Is that correct?
Right, Chair, yeah.
Yeah, okay, and have we a seconder, please? Councillor Riles.
I'm willing to second, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, on a point of clarification, are we looking at taking all the recommendations at 2, i.e. 2.1.2, let me see, to 2.9 en bloc?
Through you, Chair.
Is that what's proposed?
Through you, Chair. No, through you, Chair.
Right, I'm not quite sure what is proposed.
Through you, Chair. No, it's 2.1 and 2.2. So 2.1 and 2.2 are the recommendations for Budget Planning Committee, and the remaining recommendations are for the executive.
Mm. But we're going to make comments to the executive.
If any comments, if you wish to make any comments to the executive, that's right, they can be made. But initially, the proposal is that 2.1 and 2.2 are proposed and seconded. Councillor Wyland.
Thank you. I just like to say that the recommendations, that the 3 recommendations that this committee made at the last meeting would still be valid and moving forward on this recommendation as well. Through you, Chair, those recommendations are incorporated within the report and will be considered by the executive on the 16th of February. Thank you. Thank you. I think it was Councillor Isles. Chair.
Councillor Isles.
Yeah, I presume this is probably time for comments. So sure. I'd just like to refer to 10.3 about Breeder House. I think it's very good that the government recognises the efforts that Eden Council is setting out to make that building carbon neutral, and as such is giving us a grant towards that. I think that's very good, and also it's contributing towards the savings that the council is striving to achieve. And leading on to that, on table 7.2, it puts into context the actual amount of council tax that Eden Council is seeking to increase. And when compared to that to the county council, which if it becomes unitary, that the increase for the county council is probably going to be imposed on the whole of the council tax that Eden has currently got responsible for. So I put that in the context. One of the things the council tax pays for are discretionary services. And for years, I've argued that public toilets should be essential to the well-being of the district. And for years, I've had my voice not heard. And in fact, I was dismissed out of hand by the previous executive. That is what the council tax increases pays for. Public toilets throughout the district. We've already lost a lot, and I fear we're going to lose more as well. So I think hopefully residents will take that into account when paying the extra £5 a year. That is paying for public toilets, and that is essential in my view. Yet that has been dismissed for years by the previous executive of this council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wiles. Is Councillor Dew next?
That's right, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dew.
Yes, it's good actually to better follow on from Councillor Isles. He mentions the Cumbria County Council proposed tax increase of 3.99%. And this is the problem, isn't it? We don't live in a bubble. We are part of a bigger whole. So everyone's putting their council tax or their taxes up. And the leader of the council, Virginia Taylor, did herself no service by patronising the public and doing a calculation, dividing, it may have stretched to £5 by 50 weeks of the year and coming up with 10p a week. We could have easily said how much it would cost a day, an hour or a second and got it down to, points of pence. And that's not the point really with council tax. At this point in time, it's a psychological thing. We've all have that, the straw that breaks the camel's back. And I think it's important that we recognise that this is a part of a much bigger whole. And to put it in perspective, Councillor Earls talks about public toilets, but this council is proposing to spend, it didn't actually mention it, Paul, in 6.2, on ICT schemes alone, £506,000, £506,000 on ICT improvements. I know that's capital expenditure, but there's a symbiotic relationship between capital and revenue, and we take regularly revenue and put it into the capital programme of quite a significant amount. So £105,000 on council tax is paled insignificant just by the proposed £506,000 that we're going to spend on ICT alone. So that puts it all into perspective for us, really. And I think the point that was made, we could find those savings somewhere else. We chose not to. And clearly there is an implication going forward, but one could just as easily then, Paul, multiply £5 by the next, 25 years and say it's actually £125 over the next 25 years, rather than divide it by 50 and come up with 10 pence. Just to put it in perspective. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dew. I think Councillor Nicholson was next.
Thank you. Well, first of all, just a point of information about public toilets. Back in 2004, I led a group of 5 councillors and we convened a special meeting of the council, and we managed to persuade council to hold on to all the public toilets following a scrutiny review that recommended they be closed. And since then, I personally have been an advocate of public toilets, and it's quite wrong for him to suggest otherwise. Second, I think that in her letter to the newspaper, the leader misled readers because she claimed that a council tax increase was the only solution necessary to balance the budget. It isn't, as I pointed out in my response. And also she claimed that this was that council tax increases was conservative government policy. Well, again, it isn't, because what government policy is to limit the level of council tax increase by the various types of authority, by districts and boroughs, by the Police and Crime Commissioner, and by shire counties, metropolitan authorities, as well. So what is happening is that this administration is extracting the maximum increase possible under the legislation from many council taxpayers who are hard pressed for cash. And the responses in your paper, in the appendix there, the consultation, I think really make my point. But I mean, having said that, I very much support what Councillor Ryland said about carrying forward the 3 points that we made last time. But I would like to add a couple of points to that. And the first is that we should ask the executive to tell the residents what assumptions they're making about changes to fees and charges, and that this committee, request that any increases should be not more than the current rate of inflation. That's an additional point. The second point, I would make is that we should catalogue and address the procedural shortcomings of this committee that have been identified at a number of meetings. Now, the origins of much of these are the botched approach to the way this committee was set up, because the constitution review, which should have been completed at the beginning of last year, wasn't completed, and therefore there was no proper scrutiny of the proposals, and there was no proper consideration as to how the rules and regulations of this committee should be addressed in the constitution. And that is a major shortcoming, and we're now reaping, I think, the benefits of that, because a lot of the things that this committee has done over the time I've been on it have been done on the hoof, and that is the fact. And we should be clear about all of that. So I think we need to send a very strong message. And finally, I would really question why this council is prepared to spend in excess of £3 million of public money on acquiring, refurbishing and occupying Florida House. And these would be my additional points for the executive. Thank you.
Paul, do you want to reply to those before I ask someone else to speak?
Yeah, if I can, Chair, just on the point of the constitution, I mean, the budget planning committee was proposed by the budget last year and constitutionally set up by council. It was voted upon and was set up accordingly, and it's followed the terms of reference. It's looked at the budget. That's its that's part of its responsibility, and that was done in direct response to the question of transparency in terms of financial information, something that I recognised when I started, which was, past the point that normal budget scrutiny would have been in operation. There was nowhere for monitoring wasn't taken anywhere, wasn't taken to executive or to a scrutiny committee or anywhere. So I accept that the committee is a work in progress. It's been set up since the start of this year, in which we've had an unprecedented pandemic, and that we've all been trying to work our way through. So I think I'll say no more than that. It absolutely has been set up constitutionally properly, because it was by approval of the council. We couldn't be here if it wasn't.
Okay, I think Councillor Wiles was next, then Councillor Baker.
Just a couple of comments on some previous comments. The practice of putting the council tax increase per week is very long standing. I do remember being lectured by Councillor Nynham when I first joined the council, when his proposal was to increase council tax by only 10p a week, which is how he put it. So this has been a long standing practice. People may not agree with it, but it's certainly been going on for decades at least. And as for the criticism of spending the money on Florida House, I think we'll find it's a lot cheaper to refurbish an existing building than to build a new building kind of attached to the council house, to the town hall, which was proposed by the previous administration several years ago. So I think that the single site project has been going on for 10 years now. We've got a situation where we can go ahead in a very cost-effective way. I think is far better than anything has been proposed up to now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baker.
Through you, Chair, I just make a comment.
Yeah.
It isn't just a practice here. That is a standard practice in local authorities to present council tax increases in that way, to present it as both absolute amount and a pence per week. So that's happened in every authority that I've worked in for the last 30 years.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, Councillor Isles has led very neatly into what I wanted to say in response to both Councillor Wicks, who said gosh, and Councillor Nicholson's criticism of Vereda House. From what I understand, during the period when the previous administration was looking at a single site, they spent £900,000 on architects and consultants and achieved what? And certainly, well, probably Councillor Isles can provide the figure. When the construction of a purpose-built council building was on the cards, the budget was considerably more than 2.3 million. So that's my first comment. My second, I'm afraid I have to repeat what I said at the last meeting, which again, the previous administration didn't raise council tax for 4 years, and we ended with a 500,000 pound deficit when this administration came into being. But that was just an aside, I suppose. We have a Conservative government at the moment. They have proposed the finance settlement, and that finance settlement allows us to increase our spending by 4.5%, as Paul has said, but 85% of that is dependent upon us increasing our council tax by 5% so that we can provide better services. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Paul, do you want to make it clear the difference between what we are allowed to increase our council tax by as the district and what other authorities are, because it's not the same, is it? It's got the social care factor.
Yeah, so specifically, authorities are able to increase their council tax by 2%. District authorities can increase their council tax by 2% or £5, whichever is the greater, and that helps support smaller authorities like Eden, where a £5 increase is greater than 2%. It comes out at about 2.6% for Eden. The numbers are still relatively small. The amount that we would generate would be about 105,000. I'm aware that authorities like the Police and Crime Commissioner are able to increase it by significantly more. I can't remember what the amount this year. It might be as much as 13%, but it's certainly significantly more than we can as a local authority. So within the settlement, the government will provide information to each type of authority. So the Police and Crime Commissioner say, please don't quote me on the amount, but it's significantly more than ours. For a county council, that they can increase by 2%. There's also a social care factor of 1.99%, which enables an increase in total of up to 3.99%, and they're all before a referendum, so they're not a cap. So previous governments have provided an absolute cap where they've said you can't increase the council tax by more than an amount of money. Any authority can increase their council tax by more than, say, 2% or £5, but they would need to hold a referendum with local residents to support the increase in the council tax above that level. I'm only aware of a couple of authorities that have been down the referendum route, and I think you can probably guess what the outcome was, because they didn't end up increasing their council tax.
Okay, Councillor Wicks.
Yes, firstly, I'd like to apologise to Councillor Baker. I didn't realise gosh was a swear word. But moving on from that, Paul, Mansion House and Town Hall, where do they fit into the budget? Have we got income from sales, or have we got ongoing maintenance and upkeep costs?
So they're included. They're the single site items included at 10.3. The savings generate once they're either disposed of or dealt with in a different way. The actual disposal element though hasn't as yet been included because we don't know what it will be. Any additional capital receipt from either would be in addition. I mean, it would be a capital receipt, so not revenue by definition. If we were to sell, if we were to do something slightly different and seek to drive revenue, then clearly that would be different. But at the moment, we're looking at the marketing of Vereda and of Mansion House, sorry, and the town hall is subject to a review of what it's going to be used for in the future, which is why the implications of that come in later years.
Okay, so it's a big sort of question mark. We don't know whether we're going to get rid of them or keep them or.
Well, I think again, numbers, we've got more certainty around Mansion House because we're further through the process of the potential marketing and what it could be used for. We've had a hotel study that's already been done on it, so we have better understanding in terms of what Mansion House could be, but not an idea of what it might drive and whether it will be revenue or capital. When we know more, we'll incorporate it into the budget. But again, it's that trying to be prudent in terms of what it would deliver. I would expect at this stage probably deliver a capital receipt, which would then, support the funding of the capital programme overall.
Nice, thank you for that. Looking to the future, not harping on about the past. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Councillor Wicks. Councillor Dew?
I'll just make a point, Paul, that the amount for the PCC, it was £15 a year for Band D, and our Police and Crime Commission is proposing 55p a month, which I'm not sure how that works out. Anyway, £15 a year.
It's more than 10p a week.
Are there any more comments and debate before we move to a proposal? I think Councillor Nicholson has got a couple of recommendations to add. Do we need those formulating so that we can clearly so that we know what we're voting on at this point?
We do. Nicola, did you manage to pick up what those recommendations were, or do you need Councillor Nicholson to repeat?
Heather's doing the minutes. I need to get them.
Heather, did you pick that up?
Sorry there, Chairman, I was just going through my notes again.
So I think the first recommendation was to see the three items put to the executive, and we know that they already have been because they're incorporated within the report. Councillor Nicholson, do you just want to run over those two items again, Heather? If you don't, do you have
additional items that we're asking the executive to specify what assumptions have been made about increases in charges, fees and charges, and also to ensure that any increase isn't above the current inflation rate.
Yeah. And
the second one was to catalogue and address the procedural shortcomings identified in budget planning committee meetings.
Okay. So that requires a seconder, Chair. Councillor Isles, you're on mute.
I do apologise. There's nothing that happens. Can I just clarify? Should we be making recommendations to the executive about how a scrutiny panel works? Because I thought that was our job, not theirs.
Through you, Chair. Obviously, I'm not an expert, but I would have to take that away and discuss with the monitoring officer. I think Councillor Isles is right. The setting up of the scrutiny panel was the domain not the executive. But I can certainly, Councillor Nicholson, I'm certainly prepared to take the sentiment of your comments away. You know, we are looking at the constitutional review. I think we want to make sure that we get the things right. As I've said, this is a new committee, and the members can shape what the committee does, what the business of the committee does. So I can certainly take that away. And if there are specific specific comments, rather than if you could identify what some of the shortcomings are that you think that they are, rather than it just being a statement that there are shortcomings, then certainly I can try and address those as we move forward. I'll reiterate that this is a committee that is seeking to address. There was no scrutiny of monitoring, and a kind of a one-off budget scrutiny committee brought in at kind of November through February to try and do a job which is an all year round job. It's as important, if not more important, to be doing the monitoring against the budget, because that's about the results. That's about the outcomes. And then, to use Councillor Wicks's point, they're the things that then help us to look forward and guide the comments into the executive about about policy and the way things happen. So this committee is doing that. It is, the information is improving. We're doing everything we can to make the information easier to see. I try and do informal sessions as well, so that so we can get some of that to you, because it is difficult in a formal setting like this, which is why we did the informal briefing before the last meeting, to go through some of that stuff in detail. But I'll certainly take away specific comments about where you think there are shortcomings, and we can try and improve them as a committee, and kind of take Councillor Iles's point that this is something, it's our committee. I want to do what the committee wants and needs to achieve, and I think that the Q3 monitoring and the way that the budget's been scrutinised this year is significantly better than it's been in previous years. If we can make it better again still, I'm more than open to hearing how we do that.
May I comment, please?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, thank you. Well, the first thing is that the recommendation we're looking at is that we're asked to make comments to the executive. Now, if it's appropriate to make comments to the monitoring officer and council, then the particular comments about what I said about shortcomings can be addressed via that route. And if that's the advice, then I will take it and follow that. On the point about the comments that have been made about the committee and the procedures, and the number of points that have had to be taken away because the information isn't there, should be a matter of record. And it should be possible to review the Democratic Services Officer's notes and identify the issues that have been raised, not just by me, but by a number of members. And these things should be done on an ongoing, these things should be done on an ongoing basis. But if Mr. Sutton wishes, I will consult with my colleagues and I will send a note, to him of the points. Now, I'm not really worried about too bothered indeed about the route that this takes, and I don't want to send it to the executive and then be turned down because that's the wrong committee. Maybe these are very real and pressing issues, and they do need to be addressed if this committee and its proceedings are to have credence with members of the public, and because we should be demonstrating to members of the public an efficient, expeditious and professional approach to the work, that we do. And I think if we reflect on some of the meetings, then it might be difficult to, to agree with, with that statement. That's really what I want. And proper constitutional provision and adherence to the Constitution is the route by which councils achieve what I said about the efficient and the professional approach. Now, and that's really all I'm saying. And if it has to go to council, then it has to go to council. If it has to go to the executive, then that's fine. But what is important is it shouldn't be dismissed because of it's the wrong route. It should be taken seriously, and it should be addressed to the appropriate authority within the council who can affect the necessary changes. Thank you.
Through you, Chair.
Yes.
I think, and clearly I wouldn't have chapter and verse, but often the issues are practical issues. So, members being able to open and access documents, and what I've done throughout is tried to support and support a route to making sure that that information is provided in a way that that members can access and can read. And I have encouraged members to get in contact where information is not either not understandable or it needs to be done in a different way. I think that's different to the committee not following its terms of reference, because actually I think the committee is absolutely following its terms of reference. I'll repeat the point because it needs to, taking a point away that the committee has shortcomings without understanding what the shortcomings are is difficult for me to address. I need to hear what from any councillor what they feel the shortcomings are, and I will try and put them right. But at this stage, I don't know what the shortcomings are.
Okay, thank you.
I will have a conversation with the monitoring officer.
Councillor Ireland.
You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Right, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to comment, this is a scrutiny committee, and I myself have no problem with the recommendations by Councillor Nicholson going to the executive. I feel that is the correct procedure for a scrutiny committee to do so, because in the other scrutiny committee on the council, that overview and scrutiny committee can actually bring the executive to give evidence in front of it. So I actually feel as that this scrutiny committee can make comments to the executive. It is up to them whether they wish to reject them or wish to accept them. So I have no problems, and for transparency, I think any governance should be scrutinised. It's a good principle.
Through you, Chair, I absolutely couldn't agree more, Councillor Ireland. The only thing I would add to that is that in its first meeting of the Budget Planning Committee, we agreed that we would invite, I think the finance portfolio holder had said that she would be prepared to come to meetings, and the committee said that it wanted to have the right to be able to invite Councillor Greenwood and as portfolio holder, and Councillor Greenwood has been here one if not two of our meetings. So yeah, absolutely agree with that, Councillor Ireland.
Okay, Councillor Riles.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a bit concerned that we seem to be putting scrutiny in the hands of executive. I mean, I'm not too concerned under this regime, but certainly under the previous one, I'd have been very uneasy. Surely the proper route to go for any concerns we've got about the structure of this committee is through the scrutiny and overview committee, which I think we used to be the scrutiny co-board. I mean, any shortcomings in the scrutiny committees should be handled by scrutiny and should be kept well away from the executive. As I said, now I'm not too concerned, but in previous years I would have been very concerned. Thank you.
Through you, Chair, I'll take the comments away to the monitoring. So I don't want to. It's monitoring officers' domain in terms of in terms of where the committee reports. In terms of, because this is talking about the structure of the committee, which is different to the committee being able to make comments to the executive. So the terms of reference of this committee is that it can make comments to the executive. If it's asking questions about itself, then it's not the executive that set the committee up, and that's what's different, and that's why I would take the question away to the monitoring officer rather than pass it to executive as a comment, because I think it's different to what the terms of reference are that are set for the committee.
Councillor Dew.
Yes, and I'm going to be caught between a rock and a hard place here, Paul. I agree with yourself on this. And I thought we were commenting on the recommendations, not on anything that happened to be coming into our mind at a particular point in time. We seem to have strayed off the recommendations altogether. So I think as long as the debate should be minuted, so we actually pick up some of the comments that have been made. As I say, I'm going to be caught in a difficult position here.
Through you, Chair, I'm more than happy to make sure that the minutes reflect this part of the debate. I think that's important, and will give me the opportunity to go away, talk to the monitoring officer to then bring back where we can take the sentiment, because I absolutely understand the sentiment and how we work this forward as a committee.
Oh, thank you, Paul. Can I just ask Councillor Nicholson if he's still got a recommendation to pass from this meeting to the executive? So
it's through you, Chair. It's the one on fees and charges.
Yeah, right.
Which I'm happy to pick.
Is that okay?
So and you had a secondary in council.
Yeah.
You just need to do that verbally, Councillor Wicks.
Was it Councillor Wicks?
I thought it was Councillor Wicks in the chat.
Yeah, sorry, I'm putting my camera on. Just like to make the point before I second it. I'm a bit concerned about Councillor Isles saying he'd put the scrutiny in the hand of any executive, whether it be Tory, Lib Dem or Alliance. I think that's totally irrelevant, but I will second Gordon Nicholson's proposal.
Just said I'll be happy and not happy.
Can we just clarify? Are we just talking about fees and charges now? Have we dropped the other one?
I believe so.
So we have three recommendations: 2.1, 2.2, and a recommendation to ask the executive to consider what fees and charges assumptions have been included, and to ensure that no increases above inflation have been included. So happy to move to the vote.
Move to vote, please. Yeah.
Councillor Baker.
Well, I think I understand what we're voting for. I'll abstain.
Councillor Dew.
I also think I know what I'm voting for. I'll say 4.
Councillor Isles.
I think I know what we're voting for, and I can't possibly agree with the suggestion about not putting it up above inflation, so I'm going to say against.
Councillor Lancaster.
4.
Councillor McCall.
Against.
Councillor Nicholson.
4.
Councillor Ryland.
4.
Councillor Wicks.
4.
That motion's passed, Chair.
Right. So I don't think we have any items left on the agenda other than the date of the next scheduled meeting, which we haven't got at the moment, and will be confirmed at the annual council meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll move to close the meeting then. If we've come to
second that.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, that's good. I need a second. Okay, thank you everybody for coming and
Thank you, Chair.
contributing.
Thanks
Yeah.
all.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Bye.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Cheers.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you
Debbie.
very much, Paul.